Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Pikach, and this session will be led by Ari Acosta and Jesse Davis, who will introduce here in just a minute. We're all here to make your engagement in this series as sweet as possible, and I'm going to be serving in the chat, navigating technology, and supporting you as best I can. In order to limit background noise, we're going to keep everyone muted, except when we're in breakout rooms. We have automatically muted your Zoom view on our end from the Zoom connection. And please note that you can come on and off of your audio, especially when we're in the chat rooms. And if at any point you have a question, you can type your question in the chat box. I'll be navigating that and answering any questions. We'll also have some times to pause and address questions as they come, or we may save them towards the end of our presentation. Today's webinar is brought to you by the South-Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, an initiative funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. We provide free training and ongoing consultation to the diverse array of professionals that serve individuals with mental health challenges across our 5-state region, which will be highlighted in purple on the next map. And this includes Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arkansas, Louisiana, and several tribal communities. The Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC for short, is a project of the Texas Institute for Excellence in Mental Health, which is housed at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Austin. This is our wonderful team who we have all contributed to make, maybe the next one, Ari, who have all contributed to make this event possible. I think I can genuinely speak for our team, and I say we are humbled to be able to provide this space for this critical workforce. And we've all faced drastic changes and challenges in supporting and serving our communities this year. Before we introduce our speaker for today's event, we need to take the time to set the stage. Next slide, please. In our time together, we invite everyone to engage and practice holding a learning space that's reflective of these principles. Just give you just a moment to read through those. Finally, we're providing CEUs, and we will be requesting that you complete the post-event brief survey at the conclusion of this session. You will see a QR code and a link to complete a brief survey. At the end of our webcast, I'll display a link that you can use to complete the survey. It takes 3 minutes or less. Please take care of that so we can better serve you in this. Today's event is part of the South-Southwest MHTTC's focus on school mental health, as I'm going to introduce Ari and Jesse. Jesse Davis, they, is an MHPS and RSPS in Texas, currently working at the South-Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Jesse works to provide support, technical assistance, and training to the peer workforce throughout the 5 states of Region 6. They have spent much of their career focused on youth and young adult peer support and are currently the Vice President of the National Association of Peer Supporters. Ari, is a mental health, gender, and equity specialist. Her current work involves providing technical assistance and trainings around cultural humility and mental health, application of the class standards, and diversity, equity, inclusion to behavioral health professionals at the Texas Institute for Excellence in Mental Health. She has 2 master's degrees, one in sexuality counseling and another one in women and gender studies, plus 8 years of experience as an assistant professor, clinical psychologist, and human rights specialist in Venezuela, where she's originally from. Ari reached her 10 years of experience in mental health field, adding intersectional lenses to her work, while bringing her lived experience as an immigrant, CIS, gender Latino woman in the United States. I'm so excited to welcome our amazing presenters and looking forward to engaging with you in the chat box.
Thank you, everyone. Give me 1 second while I figure out how to share the big screen. Does everybody see that well? Awesome. All right. Next to me. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're super excited to be here with y'all today. We know it's 5 p.m. and we appreciate your time so much. Jesse and I are very excited to spend this time with you today. This is session 2, what is or what's behind the pronoun of our incredible series, creating supportive environments for the LGBTQIA2 plus students and staff in schools. Let's get started. As we were talking about, my name is Ari Acosta and my pronouns are she and ella. While we get comfortable, while you're drinking your coffee, drinking your water, kind of stretching out of that, so I'm sure super long day at work. We wanted to share a few friendly reminders. The first one is please use the chat to chat. Please share your name, your pronouns, and what's your role in school mental health. You probably get to know more people are doing the same work, or you get to say hi to your friends. The second thing is it's very important to us to set expectations for today's session. So we want to remind you that this session goal is to practice. And we're going to practice the use of different gender and gender neutral pronouns as a supporting and reaffirming practice for trans and non-binary youth. On this session, we want to make sure that everybody knows that we're not really going to be focusing on grammar or linguistic theories or analysis, at least for today. But instead, we want you to become more comfortable when using pronouns that might be new for you, to learn about the importance of using them and how to provide a more inclusive, welcoming, and affirming school setting by doing so. Last thing is feel free to add any resources, comments, and questions during the entire session. We have Natalie helping us to keep an eye on the chat so we can respond to questions during the presentation and just interact with everyone. To start, of course, this is not an English class, but we, of course, we need to kind of define what is a pronoun before we start asking and discussing what is behind it, right? So pronouns, everybody knows, at least in the English language, is a word that can function by itself as a noun phrase, and that refers to either the people talking, meaning I or you, or someone or something that's being talked about, don't know about, like she, it, them, and this. When we talk about these pronouns and we assign or intentionally don't assign a gender to it, we talk about gender pronouns. Gender pronouns are the words you might like others to use for you in place of your proper name. Some examples include she or her, or he and him, or gender neutral pronouns such as ze and here, or they and them. In my case, my name is Aria Costa and I use she and her pronouns, ella for Spanish. So some people could use specific pronouns, like myself, I only use she and her. Other folks could use any pronouns they feel comfortable and they use he, they, and she pronouns. But other people feel more comfortable by not using any pronouns at all. So by referring to them, you will use their name all the time. These are a few examples of how this is probably going to take you back to a few classes and my own personal classes when I was starting learning English, and how we can combine them and what our different pronouns are. So this is a great resource. Is from the Trans Student Educational Resources, which is a youth-led organization dedicated to transforming the educational environment for trans and gender non-conforming students through advocacy and empowerment. This is an organization that's been founded in 2011, and they have a lot of great information and resources for students and staff and teachers and everybody in the school setting. And I think if we can have the link on the chat, that would be great. It's a website. And so what we can see for gender pronouns, they have a very important disclaimer that says, please note that these are not the only pronouns that exist in the world, or the only pronouns that you are going to be listening to or knowing about. There are an infinite number of pronouns as new ones emerge in our language. Always ask someone for their pronouns. So here are just a few examples of probably the most common pronouns, at least in my experience and what you probably have heard. However, keep in mind that these are not the only ones and that you're going to see a lot of variety during this session. These are a few examples, right? So for example, for me, I use she and her pronouns. So it's she, her, and hers. The reflexive is herself. So in the examples, we use she is speaking, I listened to her, the backpack is hers, right? Same as he and him and his. He is speaking, I listened to him, the backpack is his. For this too, if a person is using they and them pronouns as a plural, we can ask they are speaking or they is speaking. I listened to them and the backpack is theirs, as well as the pronoun ze, here, and hers. We can have these examples on Z is speaking, I listened to hear, the backpack is theirs. I'll leave that for a moment, kind of digest that info. Want to make sure to talk why are we talking about pronouns and why is this important in the school setting, and why are we dedicating an entire session of our LGBTQ series and school mental health to talk about pronouns. One of the things that is very important for us to make sure everybody knows, and kind of like to link on session number 1 with Dr. Stephen Russell, is that honoring a person's pronoun, honoring a person's name, is respecting people's identity in the first part, right? It's very important as we are an institution that focus on mental health, that honoring a person's pronoun and talking about this topic creates a more welcoming and safe space for people of all genders. If we go back to the research Dr. Russell gave us on session 1, you can check out one of the most important outcomes and results of that investigation that says that honoring this reduces the risk of suicide and depression in trans and non-binary youth. It provides an acknowledgement and recognition of non-binary and trans people existence. And of course, affirming LGBTQ youth gender by using pronouns that align with their gender identity has been shown to improve mental health outcomes. There's several reasons about how, or several reasons that can come from just general respect for another person. Reasons on reducing, of course, risk of suicide, reasons like understanding more about human diversity and human diverse identities and gender, but also as a respect and as a mental health provider and advocate. The correct use of pronouns and names are very, very important. Not only Dr. Stephen Russell's investigation or research we have to support this, but also in the national level, we have the Trevor Project. They, of course, are an amazing reference for all this data. And on a national survey, they confirmed that affirming transgender and non-binary youth by respecting their pronouns and allowing them to change legal documents is associated with lower rates of attempting suicide. I'll make sure to put all those things on the chat so you can take a look at it a little bit more. But that's why we're talking about pronouns today. Let's go to Jessie.
Thanks so much, Ari. So hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Davis. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and also they, them, theirs. And I'm going to be going a little bit further into pronouns here. For me, both sets of pronouns work perfectly fine. And so if you would like to practice using they, them pronouns, please feel free to utilize that when referring to me throughout this time and even afterwards, as both sets of pronouns work just as well for me. I'm going to start off by talking about why we shouldn't assume pronouns. So gender expression is the way that a person expresses their gender identity, typically through their appearance, dress, and behavior. But pronouns aren't necessarily always going to align with how somebody is expressing themselves currently. Pronouns are a part of our gender identity and expression, but again, they don't always match what you might assume or what I might assume someone would use based on their appearance. And I want to take a quick note there too. We have preferred pronouns versus pronouns listed here on the slide. And I know at one point the suggestion was whenever we're having a conversation with somebody and trying to find out what their pronouns are, that we should ask, what are your preferred pronouns? Or it was a suggestion to have on written document preferred pronouns and have a blank there. And while yes, we should be asking about pronouns, we no longer use the term preferred pronouns because preferred pronouns indicates that they may not be the real pronouns. And that, sometimes there are people with multiple sets of pronouns that work just like myself, but we just call them pronouns now. What are your pronouns, or what pronouns do you use? Asking someone, what are your preferred pronouns, is now something that people tend to take offense towards.
Let's see. A few things that it's very interesting for us and we wanted to keep in mind for this session is that in our experience and when we talk about pronouns, we get a few comments around, well, maybe Ari, I don't know, I think this is a new trend, maybe it's not going to last, this is something very new, or, oh, it's just a thing, an invention from the new generation, it's just the new people trying to invent stuff, or sure, this is a thing, but it's mostly online. You're never gonna find pronouns like this or new pronouns on books were published. So we wanted to take a second to acknowledge a little bit of history on gender neutral pronouns. So there's a lot of information, a lot of research around this topic, but we wanted to highlight a few things. So according to Dennis Barron, a professor of English and linguistics at the University of Illinois, they published a really interesting and very cool book titled "What's Your Pronoun?" Beyond He or She, where it states that there's been critical discussions about the use of and need for gender neutral pronouns that date back to the late 1800s. Gender neutral pronouns were discussed frequently among local newspapers and periodicals starting in 1789. Barron in this book, and of course a lot of other researchers and professors of English and linguistics, remind us that they is a natural way to use a pronoun, and beyond the humane basic identity characteristics of using a pronoun to honor a person, it comes handy. So it refers to someone whose gender is unknown or irrelevant for the conversation. We use that all the time. It can conceal the gender of the person they were talking about because they were gossiping back in the day, or to protect the person. If you're a fan of gender studies and you have study or listening to or kind of research a little bit about the women's rights movement and everything that's related to gender studies in that matter, sometimes the use of they, it could protect the person, right? Because revealing the person's identity could put them in danger depending on the situation, as well as like publishing information or sharing information, right? A few of other books that they refer to in this book is that Charles Dickens, for example, used the word they or the pronoun they as a single pronoun to anonymize gender in the Pickwick Papers. And this book is published in 1836, which is a very long time ago. Another book and another reference from Virginia Woolf, which is a wonderful author and I love her. Has a biography, a novel that's called Orlando, a Biography, and it was posted or published in the year of 1928. And in this biography or in this novel, there's a character whose name is Orlando. And in this particular paragraph, you can see how the author changes to different pronouns while talking about Orlando, pronouns that goes from they to he to she. And excusing my English, I'm going to try to read it. And it says, Orlando remained precisely as he had been. The change of sex, though it altered their future, did nothing whatever to alter their identity. Their faces remained, as their portraits prove, practically the same. His memory, But in future, we must, for convention's sake, say her for his and she for he. So there's a lot of more information on history and just facts about the use of gender neutral pronouns. A few of other, for example, Barron also explains how the pronoun here was coined in the year of 1920 by a newspaper in California called the Sacramento Bee, where they try using that off and on from the 1920s through the 1940s. Also, the pronoun that we know as Z, which is common and often used as or thought as to be a more recent, was created by a writer identified only as JWL in the year 1864. So this is just a very quick history information. I kind of like to show how gender neutral pronouns are not new, and depending on where you look, you can find a lot of great information about it. So what's clear is that these pronouns have a long history within languages, one that is still evolving today, just as us, we're continuing to evolve, right? So to talk a bit more about how pronouns continue in the present and today and how they're part of our life, we are going to hear a little bit more about the school setting.
Thanks, Ari. So how does the use of pronouns show up in the school setting? Well, y'all are going to know a lot more than us, right? But we wanted to highlight a few of these scenarios, like in documents using attendance rosters, student IDs, yearbooks, report cards, records, relationships. So one of the ways that we might be sensitive and maybe start using some neutral terminology is, instead of saying mom or dad or guardians, we could say, what about your adults? Did your adults say it was okay? Instead of using, oh, do you have any brothers or sisters? Do you have any siblings? And depending on the age of the kids you work with, they may or may not have somebody that they are romantically looking at or having this dating experience with. But if you are in a situation where we're talking about girlfriend, boyfriend, or dating relationships, maybe we could start using the word partner as a gender neutral term. Partner doesn't necessarily mean living partner or anything else. Partner is actually a really good gender neutral term for the dating experience. In greetings, there's a lot of different options. And we hear ladies and gentlemen a lot in formal settings, sometimes in pep rallies or school administrator meetings, or all of these other situations could have a variation of that as well. Young men and women, right? Well, we can start using things like friends, everyone, y'all, guests, folks, and colleagues. One that has been popular recently when people are really attempting to remain gender neutral in their terminology is using folks as a way of identifying that the intent is to be gender neutral. And you will sometimes see it written with an X instead of a KS, but we're also trending away from that currently too. I would suggest, if you're going to write it, use the FOLKS rather than X. So another thing that may come up in a school setting is your honorific. Are you using Mrs. or Mr. or Miss in school settings? I know a lot of times in school settings, that's the appropriate thing to do, right? We want to make sure that we're showing respect to the people who we are working with. But there's also people who we work with who are adults in school settings who may prefer gender neutral honorifics and pronouns. And so the most popular one right now is MX, and that's pronounced mix, M-I-X. And you can use that for any person. Any person could use mix, even if you have the pronouns that you were assigned at birth. You have been called she, her as your pronouns for your entire life. You are a woman, you are a cisgender woman, you feel like that is your identity, you can still use mix if that feels appropriate to you or if that's something that you'd like to do. There are some other ones around, and you'll see them written in this paragraph, but there's also one very specifically that's widely accepted in school settings. Can anyone guess in the the chat box, which one that is? What can you think of? There's teacher, yes, that is sometimes accepted, but sometimes also teachers think of that as disrespectful depending on where you are. Hey, teacher. Not everybody likes that, right? But that is one that is accepted in certain situations. And some people do like it. Can y'all think of another one that might be already accepted in school settings? We, yep. I'll give y'all a hint of the one I'm thinking about. Well, yes, professor and instructor is great for in higher education settings, and coach, that is the one that I was looking for specifically. Coach is gender neutral. You never know unless you know the person. And not everybody is going to be a coach, right? But we already are using gender neutral language in our day-to-day lives and with people who may not even have gender neutral pronouns. Can we go to the next slide? So this is a really cool piece of information, and Ari's going to go and scroll through this guide here, which I'm still in awe that technology lets us do this. And we're going to make sure that you have the link to this document as well. But there is specifically no law that says that schools can only use students' legal names. A legal name probably has to appear on a transcript or some of their documentation, but the school can choose to use chosen names and their pronouns on pretty much anything else should they make the effort to. There is not a law that prohibits that. I know that a lot of times it's a lot of work to change standardized forms and things like that. But I also can guarantee that if you have the ability to make these changes, it will go a long way with your students. And so we do have that document in the chat now. So a really, really important piece is, what if you make a mistake and misgender somebody? Misgendering is using the wrong pronoun that somebody doesn't use for themselves. So as I told you, my pronouns are she and they. Misgendering would show up as if you made a mistake and used the pronouns he and him for me, or ze and here for me. Those aren't my pronouns, so that would be an example of misgendering. What happens when you do that? Don't make a big deal out of it. A lot of times our first instinct is to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try so hard never to do that again. You know, like I've done this, right? And so I'm sharing from my own experience of when I've misgendered somebody and I didn't know what to do. But that's not necessarily what we should be doing. What we should be doing is when we misgender somebody and we're either they tell us, we realize for ourselves, or somebody else tells us, we apologize and say thank you, or say thank you, and then we use the right pronoun. So for example, if you were to say, this is Alex, she is one of my science students, but somebody corrects you because Alex uses they, them pronouns, you could say, sorry, they're one of my science students, or thank you, they're one of my science students. We don't need to make a bigger deal out of it than it is. We don't want to call more attention to it. We just want to correct our mistake, thank the person who helped us with it, or apologize for our mistake, and move through the conversation. So we all make mistakes, and you will likely make a mistake the first handful of times you're referring to someone with pronouns. It's totally okay, as long as we are catching ourselves and making a concerted effort to use the right pronouns and apologize when we make a mistake. Like I said before, apologizing profusely can draw unnecessary attention to or cause embarrassment for someone who uses gender neutral pronouns. And a quote on this slide, says, I think it's perfectly natural to not know the right words to use at first. We're only human. And this is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Center for Transgender Equality. So we are going to go into breakout rooms again, and I am going to read off these instructions. So I'm just going to give you a little play-by-play of what's going to happen. All right. I'm going to read these instructions, and then I'm going to go over a few scenarios, and then we're going to put you in breakout rooms. So first, we'll read those scenarios together where different pronouns are used in school settings. You're going to get moved into a breakout room with around 4 other participants. Obviously, we're in a large setting, so we may not be able to have everybody in the room. Have 4 exactly. You may have 5, you may have 3, but I want to make sure that we can give you the best chance possible to have these conversations in this practice time. And then using your own role in the school, you don't need to make up another role. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can use another role that gives you a little bit more leeway. But we want you to chat with other participants about this scenario, making sure to use the practice pronouns and give yourself that time to really use the language that are in these scenarios. I promise they're not long, and I'm going to put them up here on the slide in slide form in just a moment. So let me present those. Ari, if you will. Let me do that. And you're going to have access to these after the presentation as well. Or possibly you're actually going to have them in the chat box so that you can look at them on your own in the breakout rooms. My mistake. So the first example is Martin's adults. And we have 2 options for this one. Martin has asked you to speak with their adults about needing help with their homework. What would you plan with your co-teacher in prepping for the adult teacher conference? Alternative situation. Martin uses they, them pronouns, and their adults want you to talk with them about a specific assignment coming up. The adults will be coming during your planning time, but your student teacher will be meeting with them instead. What conversation would you have with your student teacher to prepare for the meeting? If you want to have a conversation about this specific scenario and these people and practicing using the words adults and they, them, but these don't apply, it is okay to make up your own scenario. And that is true with all of these. Alex. Alex is dating a student in your class and your student is upset. You have noticed that this is affecting Alex's grades and attention in class. Your student wants to talk to you after class. Role play that scenario. Again, if this doesn't work for your situation, you can always adjust it for your role in school to make it apply to you. Maya. Maya is running for student council and you need to introduce them before they make their presentation. Share what you would say, making up extracurricular involvement. Again, change it if you need to. Samantha. Samantha is a 5th grader in your school. She transitioned during the summer break and the adjustment has been hard. You are talking with your assistant principal on how you've been trying to support Samantha, and your assistant principal is asking how they can help. And yes, all of these pictures are correct. These pictures are to help you practice having hard conversations when these may be new to you. They're probably going to be hard. Mix Branson teaches in the classroom next to yours. It's the first day of school and Mix Branson is in the classroom next door and the students keep mistaking your classroom for his. Help redirect the students. Kevin is a new student and is adamant about her pronouns being she and her. The 4th graders in your class are having a hard time accepting this, and Kevin is starting to be teased. You're chatting about the situation in the teacher's lounge while eating lunch, trying to get support from fellow teachers. All right, as we have almost everybody back and loading back in, I want to go ahead and give you a welcome back, everyone. I hope that was wonderful. And I know you may have questions after that. And if you put them in the chat box, that's awesome. And I also want to make sure you know that those slides are there for you to practice with. You can take them to fellow teachers who you want to practice with, or you can take them and adjust the pronouns so that you have different options, because the pronouns on those slides aren't the only ones out there. There's a lot of pronouns, and all of the pronouns that people use are valid. As Ari shared with her history of pronouns, it's different pronouns have been utilized for a long time, and currently we call them neo-pronouns, which may sound like new pronouns, but they're not necessarily new. It's just neo for non-traditional pronouns, and they're all valid. So with that, Ari is absolutely amazing with resources and found some interactive websites for you to practice with and play with this different use of pronouns in sentences as well. And so we put that in the Natalie put that in the chat box for you to click those links and get. They're also here on the slide. And I know Ari has something really cool in the next couple of slides, so I'm going to pass it back over to her.
Thank you, Jessie. Yeah, so if you have time to continue to practice, please use this. It's very cool. Have like some game platform to it, so it can be very interesting. So we wanted to close this session by doing two things. One is to, of course, thank everyone for your time and for your willingness to practice and to be put in a space with people to maybe do something new, maybe do something that might be a little bit uncomfortable, maybe nerve-wracking. So we want to thank y'all for being open and practice with everyone. This is a phrase that I read in a book called They, Them, How to Use They, Them Pronouns, and I thought it was wonderful. It says, well, they might be for some. Recognition, respect, safety, and freedom is for everyone. Since our session is called What is Behind a Pronoun, we want to take the last couple of minutes to share a link with you and an activity. If Natalie can put the link on the chat, or you can use your phone and open the camera and use the QR code that's on the slide on your screen. You can help us create this word cloud on what is behind a pronoun. So use one word that can define what noun pronoun means for you. And I can share what people are starting to create with us. In the meantime, if there's any questions, I know we have 1-2 minutes left, we can answer, that would be great.
All right, Ari, did you want to flip over to the word cloud as people are putting things in? There we are.
Do you see it? Yay. Oh.
And I know Natalie had one last thing to share as well. So yes, the survey link is in the chat box, and I'm going to ask, we're all similar in our profession. We have things we need to do, right? And getting these surveys filled out is something that we need to do in order to keep doing things like this. If you'll give us literally just a minute or two of your time afterwards, I promise it's super short, and fill out that survey, that will help us continue to be able to provide these types of webinars and other activities into the future. And Natalie, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Oh, just thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. I would encourage everyone to join us for sessions 3 and 4. I know you have some burning questions that you'd like to ask, and we're going to have a fantastic panel able to answer some questions for all of you. The recording will be posted by the end of this week. We have actually created a landing page where we'll be posting each of the recordings and all of the resources that we've been sharing. And we just appreciate you being here and thank you for the work that you do each and every day.